not going to want to miss it. Cool. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, the thing that I wanted to say to you here is that there's a couple of really important discoveries here that I think need to be called out. And if you go to the actual bottom of the graphic itself, you'll see where it says readiness, momentum, and recovery.
That's awesome.
There's really actually kind of three parts to the entire process. If you want to, at the end of the day, look back and say, you know what, I adjusted well. I was able to capitalize on options as they showed up. I was able to adapt and adjust things for relevancy. I was well prepared. I had the readiness to show up as a human, to execute what had to go right in the workday. And that kind of 8 to 4, 8 to 5 time it's really an issue of momentum is what it is. And if you can implement the things that create and maintain the most momentum, then that's the name of the game. And then, of course, after that would be the recovery here, which is made up of 3 segments: pulling back, pause, and then the payback. Then this sets you up for this cycle to repeat itself day in and day out. So you start to gain control over your productivity, and you know exactly how you got there. You know that you weren't just guessing, or if there was a flat spot in the day, you can actually identify it and perhaps see where the omission or whether the overreach was. And if it was particularly good, you're able to look at it and see what were the events that led to that as well. So that was an important revelation. I have to ask something here, if I may, Nick. You know, we're kind of right in the middle of this firestorm here in Southern California. So I had to turn on this like industrial air cleaner in my space here just to be able to breathe. Can you hear that on the recording?
No.
Okay, great. That's perfect then. So if I'll take you just on a trip like through this here. So if we look at this idea of readiness and am I ready, and why the readiness is important is that if you know you're ready because you've gone through a checklist of things that tell us that it creates our greatest capacity, both mentally and physically, to perform over the long term the entire day, then our confidence automatically jumps up exponentially in our apprehension about whether I can actually create a day of value and what's the end of the day going to be like and what am I going to have to answer for. That diminishes and drops like a rock, which is the way that we really want it to happen here. So in the preparation side of it, and another feature of this here is that this is a 24-hour clock, but we're starting at 6 a.m. and we're ending at 6 a.m. when the cycle starts over. And people can adjust this any way they want, because some people naturally get up later because their natural biologic clock gets them up later, it gets them up earlier. So we're not sticking rigidly to the times here. We're just saying that there's different segments here that have a known time attached to them through the evidence of what history tells us, that if we can locate where we are and what's coming, and we know the biology and our presence of being and the actions we need to take so that at the end of the day, we're in the positive column, then our anxiety in life just drops, just taken as a whole, which is what we want, because then that gives you longevity, because you know you can play big over the long term and you know exactly why and how you did it, so it can be repeated. And it's not that every day is going to be a perfect day, because that's just the way life is organized. But what it does mean is that we can peak perform most frequently over time and maximize that and reduce the downside effects of days that have a tendency to go haywire, or not try to struggle with them and dig a deeper hole for ourselves. And if we understand the natural rhythms here, then we're in good shape. So what I did, I attached the Champions Daily Schedule to this graph that you see here, where between 6 and 8, this is a 2-hour readiness window, and the line goes up here. Well, this line represents several different things. Number one, it represents cortisol, which is the body's fire plug. It's energy hormone. It's also a hormone that is secreted and put into circulation when we're under stress. meaning that it's our stress control hormone, not our stress inducing hormone. It's the stress control hormone, and that peaks and then it starts to fall off here. So if we look at this idea of, now be mindful that we didn't create this peak artificially by thinking it to go up. It's just a natural part of a hormone rhythm that's built into our biology, that when the activities that we choose are in synchronicity with it, then we're going to be swimming the same direction as the peaks and valleys of our natural hormone cycles with the activities that we choose. You know, therefore, we're going to get the most productivity out of the time available exponentially over time, because we're not swimming upstream or getting too willful about overriding our body's natural rhythms, because there's always a price to pay for that, which is sickness, illness, amateurish mental error, so on and so forth. So if we look at here, and we'll just briefly go through these, not in elaborate detail, but just to sort of inform you what this readiness is all about. First off, this is where the theta brain waves are operational, which are deep meditative states of being when we first get up in the morning. And we've just decided that for the sake of the graph, that it's 6 a.m. And this is where we go from the theta wave to the alpha wave. Alpha wave is the state of objectivity, where we're not just reacting to life and we're not super stressed, but it's a state of being where we're making good decisions, we're seeing things coming at us, we're evaluating, we're not hyper reactive to anything, which is the way that we want it. And we don't want to try to force our biology too quickly by trying to wake the body up and the mind up, because the mind and body don't like that. And it opens up the window for amateurish, mental mistakes. So the first thing here, inbox, this is where we kind of check in with what's inside our mind, what's top of mind here. And this is where the theta waves are still operational. And this is a lot of times where problems got solved and collated while we were sleeping at night. And they are available to us if we take the time to check in with that inbox to see what's there. If we go and rush too fast to get started in life, which many people do in the morning, then we miss that window, we miss the gifts of solutions that were gifted to us to complex problems. And it only takes a couple of minutes to check in on that space. And then the next item here is center ourselves as a human, anchor ourselves to the day, put ourselves in a grounded state. That can be done through prayer. It can be done through meditation. It can be done through diaphragmatic breathing, traditional meditative art exercise forms like Qigong and Tai Chi, yoga, etc. And why that's important is that the mind, as it slows down and as we become objective, that stills the mind, because the mind synchronizes with breath. And this is a way of kind of putting on the armor for the day, where we don't get too reactive too quick in the day and start to lose control over our objective decisions by the early irritations that people, places, and things might find their way into our consciousness. The next item up is a warm up here in 15 minutes. Again, this could be 10 minutes, it could be 2 minutes, whatever. But this is a physical activity just to warm the body up. We're not going to call this exercise training. We're not going to call this a workout that connotates hard effort. The body doesn't like hard effort early in the morning. It's too much of a shock, and it can consume way too much energy, way too early in the day that we need for later in the day. So in this instance, we're talking about perhaps a walk outside, maybe a time on an elliptical inside, perhaps some calisthenics followed by some stretching, a stationary bicycle, maybe doing some really gentle intervals. But the idea of getting the temperature of the muscles up and elongated, so we kind of get into our best posture of the day where we're conserving energy moving. And then from that, once the body's warmed up, we go into a kind of grooming mind meld here. Grooming means, showering and primping and doing all the things that we need to do in a day to get properly attired and groomed in our health procedures in motion here. But also, while we're kind of going through that mechanical process, there's the word mind here. And this is where, while we're kind of going through this grooming process, it opens up some space for our mind to really think about, what sort of a mind am I going to bring to the conversation today? Am I going to let my human nature, fear-based survival impulses that will take me out of control and not optimize my decision-making and my presence of being? Or do I want to choose the champion's path, which I call the champion's mind, which is that side of us that's calibrated towards creating excellence and being the person that we can be? And that's a conscious decision that, we have to make each and every day. And I really feel that we have to make that deliberate. We have to be present with the process. It has to be a willing selection that we're doing with full conscious awareness. And that's a really good time to do that. While the mind is open and available while we're grooming, that's a perfect time to do that. And again, I allocated 20 minutes. It could be 15 minutes. It could be 10. That's just a discretionary number. The next item, and you'll notice here that we're kind of moving up as we're building energy, and the hormones are moving up towards a peak here at 8 a.m. This is where we could do some study. A lot of times in the morning, it's really a great time to allocate somewhere between, let's say, 20 and 60 minutes of study time. People sometimes do very well reading at that time, taking notes. And this is not so much creative thinking. This is like kind of investigating things, maybe reading a couple of books or a couple of articles, or following up on a tip that someone gave us, just something to invigorate the mind and set us up for a strong mental tone of the day. Sometimes we get great revelations there that we can actually implement that day. Had we not done the study, then we would not have had that opportunity. And then we have here breakfast review, 30 minutes, again, discretionary. This is where we kind of put the nutrition into our body that will be enough energy for the first 4 hours or so of the day. And simultaneously, we can review our schedule for the morning, and we can see what's coming that we need to be mindful of, that if we're not prepared for, may take us by surprise. And if it takes us by surprise, it may kind of unbalance us and knock us off our center. And then we don't perform at the level that we know that we're capable of. And again, that's always a good idea to have a preview of what's coming. And we may also decide to change a few things there because we see that what we thought it would be ideally suited for that day, we may see at that time, maybe it can be, an item can be placed at another place during the day that may be more efficient. So we can make that correction, no problem. And then the final thing that we do before we hit this peak at 8 a.m. is decide, why it is that we're actually doing what we're doing. Why are we showing up today? What's the reason behind this? And that's an important consideration that I think people need to make, because when you consciously contemplate your purpose and you really ask yourself that why am I here question, then it allows us to anchor into purpose, and purpose gives us a steadfastness to be able to pursue and achieve those things that we wish to manifest that day, that are evidence of time well spent and choices well made. And then we have presence here, meaning that we need to decide, well, how are we actually going to show up today as a human for other people? Are we going to show up at our best for them unconditionally? Or are we going to show up in a bad mood because things aren't going quite so well? And all I can say, this may be the most important question, because it sets the tone for what our relationships are and how we feel about ourselves. And it's really good therapy for us to create for ourselves a standard that calls us to a much higher game. So once we've created that readiness, then we consciously know that we're ready to start the career day, part of the day, the business side of it here. And we just arbitrarily say it's 8 o'clock, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. But what I want to point out here is that this is segment 2, which we call perform. And this is actually where you're performing. And the whole purpose of this segment here, the workday, is really about carrying productive momentum forward. That's what this is about. It's all about momentum. All the things that we do should be enhancing our momentum. Nothing should be detracted from it. But something to be mindful of is that during the business day, there's a lot of external and internal stress that we generate ourselves in terms of timelines, changes of schedule, demands, responsibility, etc. And that's controlled by another type of brainwave here that's called the beta wave. And we'll call this a beta blast because it is a blast, because the beta brain waves are high frequency, they're very choppy, they're associated with stress. Stress is pro-aging, and this is also when we're in a heavy energy burn. We're no longer conserving, but we're actually now expending energy, and our tank is now starting to drop as we're going through this period. So the first thing to approach here is what I call a push that's followed by a pause. And we call this push-pause productivity. So on the first push, which is about an hour and 30, 2 hours long, sometimes less, sometimes more, but this is about how long we can maintain concentration in a particular area before that area of our brain that's addressing that part of the activity can stay vital and be highly conscious and deliberate about the choices that are made. If we kind of stay in that zone too long, then we start to soften up and our decisions start to drift a little bit. And it's really easy to make an amateurish mental mistake because we're just not as attentive as we should be. And this is called creative hardest because first thing, it's oftentimes best to do the most creative thing that creates the most thought and ingenuity to do it at this time. And it should be the hardest because this is when we're freshest. That's why it's chosen and labeled creative hardest. And once we're done with this segment, then we come back with a pause, meaning that we're going to put our mind on idle for a few minutes. This is where the body's going to rest up from the previous push. We've got to recover a little bit here, otherwise we can dig an energy hole for ourselves. And we'll call this pause fuel. This is where it's a good time to make sure we have a little nutritious snack that provides a long-term fuel for us to get through the day. This is where we can go to the restroom. We can also have something to drink. We can check our phone for messages, etc. But ideally, this is a mental and physical pause. And what I'll say here, it's always good to pause before you get tired because it's a lot easier to get back on track. But most people, they don't stop until they do get tired. Then when they get back on track, they don't get back on track, or they do at least halfway and they can never finish the day strong. And I will point out another very important feature here is that you'll notice this black dot here. If we look at alertness cycles in the day and we look at what the science says, this 10 a.m. is an awareness peak throughout the day, which there are like a couple. And so that's why we want to make sure that we hold sacred our creative time to be done when that natural daily awareness cycle is at its peak. Then we come back and we can do our second push here. And this is still where we're using our brain, our creativity, our bandwidth. But now we'll do this in an easier area of contemplation and performance. And this will be for about 90 minutes. Another compartment that we can perform at our highest level. In the research, you'll see a lot of different ways of looking at this, but experientially, this is what I found to be really reasonable and really doable. And then we have lunch here, and we can always kind of check the approximate times by going down to the timeline on the bottom here. So you can see that when we're talking about lunch, we're talking at approximately 12 p.m. here. And that would be 45 minutes. Again, it can be less, it can be a little bit more, but the important thing about lunch is that we treat it as a pause where we eat not fast, but we eat early so we don't rush towards the end of lunch to eat so that the food can get broken down and into our digestive tract easily. This is also a nice time to take a little walk just to kind of get the temperature of the muscles up and start to push some fluid through the body where the body congests when we're sitting and standing in the first part of the day. It can also be a time to do a little bit of stretching if that's in the cards for that particular day. But again, this is designated as a purposeful pause that we should take responsibility and truly honor. You know, how we feel at lunch doesn't mean that's how we're going to feel towards the end of the day. If we're feeling really good at lunch, that's not a license not to do the things that set us up for a great second half. When we come back from lunch, this will be push number 3. And this would be, now notice that we're changing the different type of push that we're doing. The previous 2 pushes were creative. You know, we had creative hardest, we had creative easiest. Now this push here is actually technical. Well, why are we doing something technical? Well, because it's different. And this is a different part of our brain that again has an allocation of energy that we can apply. And it's always better to do the thinking things that require the most dexterity early in the morning when we're fresh, and then come back and do some of the other things in the second half of the day. And that's why we have technical. And of course, no surprise that this would be approximately 90 minutes, and this would be followed by a pause, naturally. And this would be an afternoon pause. 15 minutes is kind of like the magic number here. Anywhere between 10 and 20, you know, works well. And this is where we set ourselves up to be able to finish the day strong. And we do that by making sure that we have a snack. Sometimes it's even advisable to take a 10-minute nap. You know, my friend, Dr. Michael Bruce, who's the sleep doctor, you know, he says a 10-minute nap in the afternoon is a secret weapon. And so this is a good time to do that as well. And what you'll notice here too is that the attention low point is at 2 p.m. And so obviously when we're preparing ourselves to finish the day, where we're at our lowest attention level so far in the day, it's a perfect synchronization with that rhythm. And then after our pause here, then we can come back and do a final push for the day that would be a different category. Again, in this example, we're using administrative stuff. So maybe this is paperwork, maybe this is something else that's administrative, but you know, you can mix and match and you can move these things around. This is just to really demonstrate that when there's a deliberate attention paid to the type of work that we're doing, then again, we're kind of working with our energy circuit and hormones, we're not working against it. And then the last thing that we have in segment 2 here, perform, is where we do 3 lists. And this takes about 10 minutes. And this is the last thing that we do in the day, but it actually may be the most important thing ever. Because at the end of the workday, for entrepreneurs, I don't know if there is an end to a workday, but just generally speaking here, to be aware of how we might structure day is to, again, come back at the end of the workday when things are fresh. And the human tendency is to want to get the heck out of there as soon as possible. You just need some relief. You know, I just got to get out of here. And when we get out of here, a lot of our awareness of what we did well today and the things that we could modify and what we should pay attention to and how we should set up tomorrow gets put on the back burner. And then that may be left, you know, either the last thing in the evening or maybe the next morning when we come back to then look at what we should be doing. So let me speak to this for a second to say that at the end of the day here with these 3 lists, you know, list number 1 is to look at your list and you see the items that have a line drawn through it. Well, that's like list number 1. You never need to look at those things again because you've done it. And that's a sign of progress. And we kind of need to honor the fact that we have actually made some progress. And when we do that, we feel a little bit better about ourselves and we have more confidence. We feel like we're, you know, edging forward towards our goal achievement. List number 2 here is going to be those things that are not yet complete, but yet we know exactly where to start on them when we return to them. We know exactly where to start on them when we return to them. And then the third list is, these are items that are not complete yet, but I'm not quite exactly sure what to do. And why this is important is that the next day, when you come back, the place that you're going to start is with the list of things that you know exactly where to pick them up and where to get started on, so that you start to gain progress and carry your momentum forward the next day. And you don't need to think about in the evening what is it you're going to do, or get to work and then decide what are you going to do, because that wastes a lot of time. If we know what we're going to do because we vetted it last thing in the day by doing our 3 lists, then it's, our anxiety drops. It allows us to have a much more expansive and full like recovery from the day, because we're not worrying. We've already kind of addressed tomorrow already, and we've done it like before we leave the office. You know, the longer it takes to do it, the less likely it's going to happen. You know how that works out, right? And so we're kind of looking also is that you want to get to sleep and stay asleep. And if we don't get this done, then it kind of haunts us, because we're still not certain about tomorrow yet. And if we get certain about it before we even leave the workspace, then again, our confidence increases and our anxiety drops. Plus, it gives us another opportunity to look at it at some point later in the evening to make some adjustment, which we should. We should give our space to look at things a second and a third time, just to confirm that what we originally thought was true. And if it's not, then we can make an adjustment there. So when we show up to get something done, then we're executing that which really has to go right, because we've given ourselves the consideration of that kind of multi opportunities to look at what it is that we're proposing to do. And then once we've created our list here, and another part to this that deserves a comment is that you'll notice that I listed the end of the work day as being 4 o'clock. It could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 6. I mean, this is going to vary a lot. The important thing I just want to say here is that to be mindful that the mind can only go so long and be highly productive. And then it starts to go soft. And we cannot run at peak output indefinitely without getting sick or injured or making a really bad amateurish mental error. So when we look at this 4 o'clock time, and you'll also notice the graph here, how rather than drop like a rock here, this flattens out. Well, that's exactly what happens, because our anti-stress hormone, cortisol, naturally starts to flatten out here. So we get a particular rise in biologic function, and we can really use that to our advantage. This is the point where we could actually do a workout, like an aggressive workout, where you're sweating vigorously, you're huffing and you're puffing, and you really feel like you're earning something, you're earning a reward from a day well spent. And this is the best time to do this. And this is actually when most of the athletic world records are broken in the day. It's in this period between like 4 and 6. And the reason why is because we have this hormone boost there that's just part of a natural, healthy cortisol daily rhythm cycle. And once we've completed the workout, and the value of that is that the mind is idle. You don't need to think anymore. This is a time where your brain starts to now collate stuff while your body's physically active, and it's kind of putting everything back at its biologic best, creating circulation. You're going from your head to your heart. You're going from your heart to your soul. Those two things have been on hold all day, where you've been inside your head, working with your brain there. And this is a great opportunity to kind of reconnect with those two other essential parts that make up us. And once we're done with the workout, then we kind of rinse the day off by, again, it could be a shower, shower plus, hot tub. It could be a sauna, whatever. The point is here is that once we've kind of physically cleaned the pipes out a little bit, and we come back and we're literally rinsing off the day, where we kind of have a much less memory of the challenges and the difficulties and the victories of the day itself, which is a great way to kind of usher in the rest of the time that we have in the evening with family, friends, so on and so forth. once we're done rinsing, this is a great time to debrief and connect with people that you may need to catch up on. Again, these times are variable. You decide. These are estimates just to kind of keep in mind, but they're not meant to be rigidly followed. But sometimes when we're working out and the mind's idle, things occur to us that didn't occur to us when our head was buried here. And as they occur to us, it's better to take action on them rather than to assume that we're going to remember them later, or it may not be a better time later. So my suggestion is that this is a great time to debrief because you're kind of relaxed and still kind of in the game, so to speak. And this can be a really effective time to touch bases with people because they're not yet settled in for the rest of the evening. And then there would be 30 minutes, which would be discretionary time to relax. And this is where the kind of edge really falls off, where we go from the beta brain wave, which is pro-aging, to the alpha brain wave that is anti-aging, which is what we did here in segment 1 preparation as well. And then this is where our energy stabilizes. So you can see that this is a wonderful opportunity here to then shift into our recovery phase. And this would be segment 2 here, which is pause. And pause is chosen because it's where we deliberately cease kinetic activity, where the motion stops a bit and we become contemplative and we connect with others. And it's aptly called pause here. Dinner allocated an hour, maybe more, maybe less. This is a chance to really connect with family and friends and loved ones and share days and be able to, again, have a level of conversation that kind of pulls everybody back together again. And then after dinner at some point, all the dishes put away, etc., then we could do what I call set the stage for 15 minutes. And setting the stage is setting the stage for tomorrow. And this is where we would get our food ready for tomorrow morning and tomorrow. And we would also get the clothes out that we will be wearing tomorrow. And so why are we doing this now? Well, we're doing this now because it's not a meaningless task, but it's not a mental task. Your brain's idle while your body is doing this simple task. And when you put your clothes out and your food out and you know where it's at, then that's something you don't need to think about in the morning, because the whole thing that can derail a morning is upset. You try to look for your socks and they're not there. You get a green one, you get a red one. All of a sudden you're irritated. The day hasn't even started yet. Or you're looking for your food and you went for the peanut butter and somebody didn't tighten the peanut butter cap on the peanut butter jar. And when you pulled it out by the cap, it fell on the ground and broke the jar. Now you got to deal with that, mental trip to Mars. And so when we put all that out there, it also tells our subconscious and our brain that you've done all this stuff, you can actually get to sleep and stay asleep. You don't need to worry about tomorrow. You don't need to worry about what you're going to be doing tomorrow because you've already figured that out. You've had a chance to look at it, make some corrections and some adjustments. You got a great workout in. You've talked with some people. You've had a period of relaxation you deserve. You're now refueled here. You got the nutrients in to repair the body. You got all your stuff out for tomorrow. You're starting to feel pretty good. And then mid-evening, elongate. This would be like stretching of some sort that could be done on the floor with family in conversation or something along those lines. And why that's important is that everything that we do during the day is flexing the body into a bent over, almost like fetal position. And the fetal position actually just takes energy to hold the position. Whereas we're designed to stand up upright in gravity so that just standing, our body's on idle and it's not consuming any energy. But we can only do that if the body is elongated and the muscles are the length that they're designed to be. And the other side of the elongation is that it takes tension out of the body. And when tension is removed from the body, we get to sleep and we stay asleep. And any pain that we do have is directly connected to tension. Less tension, less pain. More tension, more pain. And so by doing that, you can see how we're naturally kind of winding down the day in a sequential way where it's not forced, it's natural. And it also follows the red line here that represents that represents a further reduction in the cortisol anti-stress hormone as it's starting to fall off. And then the final thing that doesn't need to be 30 minutes, of course, but we just allocated a window of time, and where it's placed in the sequence here is the very last thing that we could be doing, is where we taper, meaning that we're starting to think less. The electronics have been turned off for over an hour now. We've elongated, we've had appropriate conversation with family, we've gotten our stuff out. There's not a lot left to do. So naturally, you're going to start to wind down. The eyelids are going to get a little bit heavy there. And then this also may be a good opportunity to just take a peek. Now, notice that I used the word peek here. I didn't say chase the rabbit hole, but I said it's, you know, fair and reasonable to also you know, check your inbox to see if there's any communications that have come in that are an emergency that you need to respond to. This would be a great time to do this, but that's not giving license to go and start, you know, chasing, you know, topics, surfing the web indefinitely. And at this point, we're conserving energy and we're in our alpha wave state. And then the pause segment concludes here. And then we have our third segment in phase 3 recovery. And this is called payback. And this is where you're going to pay back all the debt that you incurred since 6 a.m. in the morning. Sleep deprivation, nutrients, neurotransmitters, hormones, etc. This is where they get paid back during this 7-hour sleep cycle. Some people can do with less sleep, some people need more. We're just kind of picking a midpoint here just to get the idea that there are like 3 segments in phase 3 recovery. And please be mindful that once we're asleep, the first thing to recover is the body in the first several hours of sleep. And then the mind and the brain and our psychology is recollated in the second half of the sleep cycle, taken as 2 halves. And there are 4 sleep cycles that have peaks and valleys. But I just want to make sure you get the idea here is that your body recovery, wound repair, et cetera, takes place in the first part of sleep, and the mind, body, psychology is in the second. And at 4 a.m. is when we have our lowest level of alertness. And when we come here from pause to payback, and we hop in bed, and we're just using 10 p.m. here. This is a kind of arbitrary number here, maybe less, maybe more. But the first thing that we're going to do here is that we're going to consciously contemplate and consciously, more importantly, give thanks for the things that deserve to be acknowledged and recognized as good fortune that day. I mean, just the fact that we're here and we have another day, or just the fact that nothing went wrong, that's its own reason to show some level of conscious gratitude. I know a lot of people do a lot of gratitude stuff in the morning. I just feel like the gratitude at night is really an important conscious exercise that sets a tone that allows our mind, body, and soul to pause and let down and nurture in bask in the biology and the gift of life as we're experiencing it. And then once we've kind of hit that point where we're kind of done with that, is that then the final thing is that we give ourselves permission to fall asleep, because the world doesn't need us for the next 7 hours. You know, what we need is good recovery to restore the body and let those problems to be solved and put into our inbox in the morning, you know, find their way to, you know, maximum effectiveness and be in the inbox in the morning to be able to retrieve them. And again, this is not an assumption. This is something that we deliberately give ourselves. And when we deliberately say, time to go to sleep, I don't need to be up. People don't need me now. Problems can be solved with my active participation. And I'll see everybody in 7 hours. And again, this is where the delta brainwaves predominant. So this is a kind of a brief overview of the Champions Daily Schedule. Like, well, where did this come from? Well, it actually came from my experience over the last 50 years in the high performance world, working with athletes, gold medalists, and working with platinum album musicians and performing artists and titans of industry, et cetera. And this is what's really demonstrated itself to be a doable system that really kind of serves as a 5-course meal. The first course is prepare, right? Phase 1. The second course is, phase 2, perform. The third course, has 3 parts, which is pull back, pause, and payback. Those are like a 5-course meal. And this serves like as a menu where you can look here, and the ones that you have a particular gravity towards, those are the ones that you want to implement. This is not designed to be taken as rote, and if this is followed, it takes you to nirvana, because that's not how it works. This is a menu to be chosen from. This is not meant to be something to turn your life upside down. I showed this to one of my clients, and he owns an investment company in Vancouver, British Columbia. He says, I want that. I'm going to follow it to a T. I said, well, no, you're not, because that's not the way it's supposed to be used. I said, we're going to start with 2 things here on this that are most relevant for you. And you've told me what they are, and I happen to agree. So we're going to do those first, and we're going to note the change on this. We're going to give it time to see the effectiveness of these 2 things that we have chosen. And if they have proven themselves to be effective, well, great. Then we know what created the change, these 2 things. Now we'll add 1 or 2 others. But if we do all of this simultaneously and it overwhelms the body and it can't actually be done over time, then it's really easy then to discount it, but it was just too much too soon. So it was really pilot error. Or if everything succeeds, then you're not going to know exactly what created the change. And maybe 90% of what's on here wasn't relevant, but you don't know that because you thought it was the sum of the whole, where maybe it's not. So that's why when we kind of look at this first and foremost, 5-course meal, it's a menu to choose from. We all have our particular tastes. Let's go with 1 or 2 of those first. And there are kind of 3 outcomes that we're looking for here. Number 1 at the bottom, readiness. We've got to make sure that we're ready to engage the day. And it's got to be a process. You think a professional football player would step onto the field without a good warm-up and get injured, and beat to a pulp, before the game effectively even got started? No way. Next thing was momentum. How come I can't get anything done during the day? Well, maybe that's because we didn't know how to put the elements that are required to get things done in a way that allows us to complete cycles of action. And then recovery. I don't understand why I'm sick again. I'm always getting sick. Well, maybe that's because you're not recovering. Let's take a look and see what you're doing here that we might be able to better align with the reality of what it really is. And so that's what this Champions Daily Schedule is. And we could talk for hours and days on the nuances of this, which I would love to do at some point. But suffice it to say that I hope you learned something from this. If you'd like to actually get a copy of this, you can just kind of go to the button down below and request it. And we'll make sure that you get a copy of this. And, if you would like to have a conversation to dig deeper on this, you can certainly reach out to me by going to www.beforeyouwin.com, and that will gain you access to some other information that I think that you will find absolutely imperative. I guess the other thing that we'll say here too is, this is recorded on a day where I have fires around me. I mean, there's this blaze, you can see I'm sweating. Southern California, we have these catastrophic fires like right now, and I was just really inspired to share this with you. And when it's time to step up and deliver on the goods, well, you got to step up and deliver on the goods, and I hope that I've done that for you. So thanks again. Look forward to connecting soon. Please, once again, if you want a copy of this, please push the button below. We'll see you next time. Onward and upward.